Hi everyone, Flat Daddy here. I wanted to go over some research I've been working on the last couple days. Um, it's to deal with this whole paradigm of the flat Earth, the history of it and such. Uh, so you can see here, like if we, look back at the past, we got pretty generalized history. Most of us know it as far as the line here, But the flood and the Tower of Babel, to me, those two actually really symbolizes events that in our past showed that where Satan really tried to push forward, and we've seen the signs, symbols from there ever since. Now the Egyptians made a big role in the past. We see it everywhere, and through my research, I've seen that there's actually a sect of the Egyptians during the 13th dynasty, so before Christ, where that actually, when you look at it and it goes into the Roman time, they separate, and actually Judaism is born from that sect, and that sect was actually all about sun worship. Now, over the years, it looks like that sect has developed and changed, and I don't want to really go over the history as much, because the 1,000-year throne, as I call it, because they hide so much by throwing that blanket over us. The psychology of our past and everything like that is well constructed, and we don't know the history for, to be quite honest, beyond our living relatives who have passed on stuff, and hopefully it's the truth. So I mean, we look today and we have these huge companies and stuff that are pretty much, we know they own the world. We got Google, Disney, all these places, and I was thinking, I wonder where the change happened. Like, how did they get control? So when you look back, you can see that these guys have been working a plan, and I think Disney is the centerpiece to this all. You can see here the big six, and what has happened is these partnerships have basically constructed a reality around us. People don't want to believe, they want to say it takes a lot of people and stuff, but it doesn't. I'm going to show you two clips basically here that is going to hopefully wake you up to see what is going on here. This plan has been developing. The starter year is 1966 mainly on it, but it was instilled a little bit before that. So it really took off. I mean, I think it really started taking off around the First World War when Disney had exposure. But, even with Santos, like the clip I showed in the other slide, showed this scene where the lady's cooking dinner. And that the son goes and asks, well, what is it? And she goes, well, it's ducking a la orange. And anybody who knows Monsanto's knows that they create Agent Orange during that time. So when you see this, it'll be a marker for my opinion for the clip that we just had seen. So just keep watching for those. The meaning of pantheon is to relate to all gods.
Who was Walt Disney? Even those who worked with him for years often struggle to define the man. For many, he remains an enigma. 2 years after the Mary Poppins premiere, Walt was dead, and the enigma began to pass into myth.
Already sounding a little bit fishy, if you ask me.
Walt's cartoons now showed his growing interest in the Great War that was being fought in Europe.
It was really the thing to be patriotic and to want to help out your country.
So right away we find out that he's patriotic towards his country.
Walt was only 16 years old, though. There was no way that they were going to let him into the Army or the Navy. Well, finally he heard of a Red Cross unit forming that would take 17-year-olds. And he figured he could manage that because that was only a year off. So after his mother had signed his passport application, he did a little forgery on it and changed the birth year.
Interesting, he changed from 1901 to 1900, 9/11.
Walt arrived in France and was put to work making deliveries, driving ambulances, or chauffeuring important officers. He took up smoking. It developed into a lifelong addiction.
The brass he met, I think, was the lifelong addiction.
Well, in America during the 20s, the animation industry was really centered on New York City. That's where the first studios had been established, and that's where the great majority of them still were.
To me, New York feels like the center of Satan's power because of the Big Apple.
He called them Laugh-O-Grams and sold the first one to the Newman Theater in Kansas City.
And one of the great things about it, I think, is that it opens with that wonderful shot of Walt sitting at his drawing board. This is Walt Disney at the beginning of his journey.
His journey, you know, it almost seems like a biblical type of path, you know?
I think he really wanted to get into full animation, and he realized just from the laborious nature of little short scenes like the police station scene, that this was not something that one person wanted to do alone.
I have a strong feeling that the Masons are our controllers, and then the Illuminati are above that.
And once again, this is a film that must have been a real eye-opener for audiences when it came out, because no one had seen anything like it. It really doesn't have much of a plot. It's basically some skeletons emerge from their tomb at night and dance some rather jaunty dances and smash each other and play each other and bounce up and down and have a good time in this very rubbery animation, all set to Edvard Grieg's March of the Dwarves.
When I was 7, I went to the movies and saw The Skeleton Dance at a matinee, and I stayed through the film, a dreadful film. But I stayed through to see The Skeleton Dance so many times that my father had to come and drag me out of the theater.
And Ray Bradbury became a horror writer, lots of novels.
The guy thought in terms of entertainment, and that was the wonderful thing about him, and that's what I guess made us all so loyal to him.
He was looking for something that was different. He was looking for something that was way out in front of what anybody else was doing in the business of animation.
As he cared enough to want to make it absolutely perfect, he'd do it over and over again until it worked, until it was right.
You can almost feel they had a plan right from there, somehow, some way. The drive is there, right?
There was times when we weren't proceeding. I think he had a sense of destiny, and he knew where he wanted to go, and he wanted to get on with it always.
And like they say, no rest for the wicked, right? So
Walt had many faces, and the face he showed his family was entirely different from the face he showed his animators and his artists. There he was a taskmaster, and a very stern one. He could be very tough, and he would never praise.
Well, one of his non-traditional techniques was to put two antagonists together. He liked the friction that came with that. He thought something creative would come out of that. He also, if he had a team working together that liked each other too much, he would break them up.
Walt had a strange habit. He found it very difficult to say to you, hey, Mark, that's a beautiful job. He would talk to Ollie Johnson or somebody else.
He turns to Frank and he says, I hear you got the best scene in the picture.
He would tell other people about you. You never heard it firsthand. It was always secondhand.
Walt sure seems like an introvert, or I'm not sure. I mean, that's weird behavior.
He had a marvelous way of making you want to please him. And when you pleased him, you didn't touch ground for a day or two.
And you just feel yourself rise up out of the chair.
Well, he was quite outspoken about anything he didn't like, particularly when we were what they call sweatbox, where we would run off the day's animation, the roughs.
And they called them sweat boxes because literally you went in and you sweat blood.
And this is the great story of Walt's eyebrow coming down and tapping his fingers on the table. I thought, oh God, I'm in trouble now.
He'd hunch forward in his seat. His eyebrow, very animated eyebrow, would go up and start looking. He'd scowl because he was concentrating so hard. And this was terribly unnerving.
Such mixed feelings from everybody and how they describe him, eh?
First thing I did when I got a little money to experiment, I put all my artists back in school. The art school that existed then